We often believe we know the people who enter our lives, especially those who present themselves with simple, gentle kindness. We see the surface, the warm smile, the helpful hand, the comforting presence, and we accept it as the whole truth. But every person is a library of unread stories, and some souls carry secrets so profound that they redefined the very meaning of friendship and family. This is a story about such a neighbor whose passing did not mark an end, but the beginning of a staggering revelation that would forever alter a young family's understanding of their past and the silent guardian who shaped it. Let us know where you are watching from and what time you found this video. As Sarah and Jaden moved into the peaceful cul-de-sac with their daughter Nova, who was 6 years old at the time, they had the expectation that they would have friendly nods and quiet weekends. They were surprised to discover a blessing that they had not been aware they needed. Bernard, who was 86 years old, he got there before the final moving box was emptied, and he was waiting on the property boundary with a pitcher of iced tea and a grin that seemed to be perpetually warming his face. Bernard, a retired soldier, was a person who had lived a long life and had a rich tapestry of tales to tell. When he spoke about Normandy, he did not do it with the booming confidence of a Hollywood hero, but rather with the calm awe of someone who had seen the canvas of history up close and personal. He was able to transform roses into stunning blossoms with his hands, which were withered and covered in He could also mend a lawnmower engine that was recalcitrant with a light touch. He made himself a permanent part of their life. During the time when Sarah and Jaden were navigating the challenges of their employment, Bernard became Nova's safe haven after school. The synergy that constituted their relationship was a lovely and improbable one. In the process of teaching her the names of the constellations, he referred to them as the night's secret diamonds. She then proceeded to instruct him on the complicated storylines of her favorite cartoons, and he would listen with the kind of seriousness that is often reserved for matters pertaining to the state. In addition to being Nova's personal magician, he was also her closest friend and a storyteller. He was more than simply a babysitter. Within the context of their hectic lives, the faith that the family put in him was unwavering and unwaveringly assured. This was their typical routine during 3 of their golden years. Then, at the age of 89, Bernard died away while he was sleeping quietly. A hollow sensation pervaded the area, as if its very heart had ceased beating. The neighborhood did not only feel quieter. For Nova, it was her first experience with loss, and it was a painful one. Until the rain distorted the crayon into ghosts of color, she drew drawings of him and put them on his doorstep. She did this until the rain stopped. In the week that followed the burial, a small number of Bernard's distant relatives came from out of state to assist in the process of sorting through his estate. Sarah and Jaden, who were experiencing a profound feeling of duty, made the offer to assist. There was a lifetime of calm dignity housed inside the walls of the home, and it smelled of old books and lemon polish. The house was perfect in every way, just as they remembered it. The basement was the last location to be affected by the problem. It was a time capsule of the 20th century, filled with labeled boxers of tax records, a dusty workshop where he had restored Nova's toys, and a drum set that had been forgotten after a short rebellion that occurred when he was younger. What was inside? During the process of lifting a hefty oak cabinet to check for dampness, Jaden made the discovery that the cabinet was not level with the wall by himself. He moved it aside with a groan, so disclosing a door that none of them were aware would be there. It had a handle that was nothing more than a recessed latch, and it was rather small and flush with the wall. It was painted the same dull brown. They did it with a gaze that conveyed a sense of both interest and uneasiness. The question, "Michael," was yelled out by Sarah to Bernard's nephew. "You ought to look at this." The door opened without making any noise, and what was revealed was not a dusty crawl space, but rather a steep and tight stairway that led down into the darkness. An ethereal and chilly buzz reached their ears. Jaden became aware of a light switch. It was the sight that they saw as the fluorescent lights began to flicker on that caused their lungs to take a deep breath and caused the world to tilt on its core. It was a stark and clinical contrast to the homey mess that was located above the area. A command center, but one that looked like it was taken from a science fiction book. A wall was lined with sleek displays that were now dark. At the middle of the room was a complicated console that had keyboards and panels of buttons that were not labeled. But the wall that was far away was the one that kept them captivated. A large corkboard was covered with hundreds of images that were meticulously tacked to it. There are photographs of them. As Jaden was out on his morning run, Sarah was leaving the grocery store, and Nova was laughing and playing in the backyard. Her face was glowing with joy. Not only were there extensive diaries written in Bernard's fine calligraphy, but there were also maps of their area that showed their daily routines and included routes that were sketched in red thread. What is this? With her palm rushing to her lips, Sarah stutteringly said, Was he some kind of stalker? On the other hand, as Jaden moved closer to the notes and his eyes scanned them, a new narrative started to take shape. Not only were the logs documents of observations, but they were also reports. On October 14th, a guy who has not been recognized approached the subject Nova in the park. It was I who started the conventional approach for friendly grandpa. The male was disengaged. Threat has been eliminated. 3 trips around the block on November 3rd. A dark vehicle with a partly covered license plate was seen driving around. I have informed the vehicle has left the area. On December 22nd, a package was dropped on the doorstep of the household, searched for chemicals that are volatile. No dirt. Determined to be a present from Amazon for the Christmas season. There was a solitary, older image that was placed in the exact middle of the board. This was a picture of a young lady with flaming red hair and a scattering of freckles over her nose. It was a perfect representation of Nova, with the exception of the period in which she was dressed. As Bernard held it in his palm, the words Protocol, Project Looking Glass were written underneath it. Watch out for the air. For the sake of Alara. At precisely that moment, Nova, who had been moving stealthily across the main section of the basement, made her way into the entrance. Her expression was one of peaceful familiarity as she glanced at the wall of photographs, rather than one of terror. She made a gesture toward the console. That's Bernie's big computer, she replied in a matter-of-fact manner. He said that he used it in order to communicate with the individuals that were watching the night. The negative shadows were being kept at bay, according to what he claimed. A scary and amazing jigsaw was being put together, and Sarah and Jaden stood there in startled stillness as the pieces began to fall into place. Everything about him, including his unlimited energy, his quick and almost predetermined devotion to their daughter, and his gentle and elderly war veteran, was a cover. Bernard was more than simply a former military officer. He had retired from work in another capacity. It is a guardian. It is a sentinel. However, he had not been keeping an eye on them out of malice. He had been keeping a watchful eye on them. Real people were the bad shadows and the unidentified males in the story. It turned out that the world was not as secure as they had thought it was, and for the last 3 years, an unassuming elderly guy who had a passion for rose bushes and fairy tales had been their covert and quiet protector. The shocking discovery that was made in Bernard's basement was not a betrayal. Rather, it was the ultimate posthumous confession of a love that was so profound and a duty that was so absolute that he had spent the last years of his life standing guard in the shadows, making sure that the family next door, as well as a special little girl who looked like a woman named Ilara, could live in the bright, simple, and beautiful light. This story reminds us that even the smallest actions can change someone's life forever. If it touched your heart too, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Your support helps us share more powerful stories like this one.